Imagine a school without classrooms, without desks, without a blackboard, without textbooks. Sounds impossible? And yet, this is what education looked like at the very beginning of human history. Thousands of years before schools existed, as we know them today, people already understood one key thing. Knowledge is power. But how was that knowledge passed on? Who had the right to learn? And why did the need for schools arise in the first place? In this video, we will explore the answers to these questions together. We will examine how and why the first schools emerged, where organized education first developed, who was allowed to learn and who was not, and which types of knowledge were considered so important that they were studied for years. Our journey takes us to the world's earliest civilizations, Mesopotamia and Egypt. It was there, along the rivers Tigris, Euphrates, and Nile, that the story of schooling began. How did scribes learn to write? Why were numbers, writing, and religion more important than anything else? And what can these first schools tell us about the societies of that time? If you want to discover what the beginnings of education looked like, something we now take for granted, stay with us. This is the beginning of the story of education, a story that starts where civilization itself began. As the first civilizations developed, societies became increasingly complex. Cities, laws, taxes, and trade could no longer rely on memory alone. One key skill became essential: writing. Oral tradition was no longer enough. Information had to be recorded, stored, and passed on accurately. Someone had to document laws, taxes, harvests, and trade, and it was this need that led to the creation of the first schools. But it's important to understand this. Education at that time did not arise for creativity or personal development. It emerged because the state needed it, for the system to function. And now comes the crucial question: who was actually allowed to attend those first schools, and who was permanently excluded? In ancient civilizations, education was not a right for everyone. Only the following were allowed to attend school: children of the nobility, priests, state officials. Most people, peasants, workers, and slaves, never had access to school. At the time, school had one clear purpose: to preserve the social order and the power of those at the top. Today, we see education differently. School is accessible to most people and is considered a foundation of personal development. This is where we see the key difference between ancient education and the kind of schooling we know today. The oldest known schools emerged in Mesopotamia, between the rivers Tigris and Euphrates. They were closely connected to temples and palaces, and their main purpose was to educate scribes, the most educated and respected people in society at the time. In these schools, students learned cuneiform writing, basic mathematics, record keeping, and accounting laws and religious texts. Learning was based on repetition. Students copied the same texts over and over onto clay tablets. Discipline was strict. Mistakes were punished, and students were expected to show complete obedience. A similar system also developed in ancient Egypt, but with an even stronger emphasis on the state and social order. Egyptian schools existed to train scribes who worked for the pharaoh and the state administration. Students learned hieroglyphic and hieratic writing, mathematics, official communication, moral and religious rules. Education in Egypt emphasized discipline, respect for authority, and each person's clear place in society. Literacy was rare and extremely valuable. To be a scribe meant power, security, and high social status. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, schools did not exist to change the world, but to preserve it exactly as it was. The first schools in Egypt and Mesopotamia did not emerge from ideals, but from necessity. They served religion, administration, and political power. Although limited and accessible to only a small number of people, these early educational institutions were revolutionary. They demonstrated that knowledge can be organized, taught, and passed down through generations. Without these first schools, there would be no later Greek philosophy, Roman law, or modern educational systems. This is where the long story of education truly begins.